Hi everyone, welcome to our fifth video of Unit 4 of AP US History, Expansion, Regionalism, and Reform from 1800 to 1848. We are still talking about economics here. In video 5, we're going to be looking at Market Revolution, Society and Culture, which is AP topic 4.6. So let's get started. So let's start by looking at how the demographics of the United States changed thanks to migration in this antebellum period. Okay, so let's start by looking at industry and migration. So in the Northeast, we're going to start to see in the 19th century, early 19th century, industrial cities just exploding in size and diversity. And it begins a little slowly in the 19th century, but especially post-Revolutionary War, we're going to start to see a number of immigrants coming in from Europe, especially Irish and German. This is really going to pick up towards the kind of middle of the century, 1830s, 40s, 50s. And again, these are mostly Irish and German immigrants coming from for a few different reasons, for a few different types of push factors. The Irish potato famine is going to lead to widespread famine in Ireland and cause many to migrate. Many of the Germans were displaced farmers. They were often disillusioned by the failure of democratic revolutions in the middle of the century in Europe, and many of them came to the United States that had this functioning democratic experiment. And most of them settled on the eastern seaboard and worked as industrial laborers in the cities, in this kind of burgeoning industrial region. They crowded into tenements. There were also many Jewish and Catholic immigrants that established temples and churches in the cities. And a few of them moved west of the Appalachians, although most of them were going to be in these cities. And unsurprisingly, whenever we see this kind of increased stream of migration, we see a provoked kind of reaction to this. So we're going to start to see the emergence of nativism. We're going to talk a little bit more about nativism in Unit 5, but this really flourished in the 1830s and 40s. Nativists saw immigrants as dangerous to the United States. They often made political cartoons that portrayed and articles that portrayed Jews as avaricious, as greedy moneylenders, and a lot of times it portrayed Catholics as agents of the Pope that were sent to undermine, the more Protestant United States. Okay, so we're also going to be seeing internal migration at this time in the U.S., mostly westward migration. Thanks to these increasing city sizes, this sort of counter migration to the west is also going to occur as people drain out of northwestern cities and move west seeking land and space. Half the population of the United States in the early 19th century was under 30. Many of them wanted to start a new life in the West. And I think this is a really, really interesting map that you have here that actually comes out of our textbook, that you can kind of see the center, the gravity of population moving year by year. So you can see in 1790, it's all the way here over on the very East Coast. In this kind of just post-colonial period where most people lived in the Northeast. But then, of course, as the U.S. opens up more and more territory, we're going to see this pretty rapid movement of the center of the population by each decade, with a lot of that happening in the 19th century, right? A lot of that happening between 1800 over here and 1900 here. So a lot of that kind of push and movement west. So slowly the kind of center of gravity for the population of the United States is moving west. Okay, so let's look at some of the social changes that accompany those economic changes that were happening thanks to industrialization that we talked about in the last video. So starting with some changes in the middle class. So we have an increasingly large middle class happening. And if you took AP World last year, you probably remember talking about this accompanying industrialization, talking about this with Europe as well. But this middle class is going to begin to include the professions like businessmen, shopkeepers, journalists, doctors, lawyers, the educated. And this middle class are not enormously wealthy. They're not aristocrats, obviously, in the United States, but there are certain norms for the middle class. Education was very, very important, especially in the U.S. and the Northeast, which had a very strong Protestant tradition. Temperance, okay, this idea of moderation in alcohol consumption was increasingly important to the middle class, and Protestant religious affiliation was very strong, not Catholic. But the main distinguishing feature of the middle class that it was emergent in this time was this ability to spend money on leisure activities and the ability to ensure that your wife did not have to work. You did not have to be a dual income household. And we're going to start to see the middle class indulging in different forms of leisure activities like plays and circuses and eventually sports in the 19th century. And this takes us into what's known as the cult of domesticity. So let's talk about women's roles and how those are shifting a little bit in the 19th century at this point. So in the last video, I mentioned that with the change in economy, we're moving away from these self-sufficient households where things are all sort of made at home, and then we're moving into a period in which things are mostly store-bought. So as homemade items get replaced with store-bought items, traditional women's work that was done in the home starts to become devalued. Homes had been a center of cooperative economic activity where men and women work together in a variety of ways to maintain the domestic economy of their homes. And instead, homes start to become, especially for the middle class, a refuge away from the happenings of economic activity. So increasingly for women in the middle class, particularly, women's identity and purpose came to be bearing children and raising children and maintaining a sort of haven within their homes for their husband to return to away from the public sphere. So men's roles were to work outside the home and maintain financial security and engage in economic activity. So we're seeing this really increasingly strong separation between the private sphere, which was considered to be female, home, domestic, nurturing, and then the public sphere, male, which would be, the center where economic activity happened and political activity, and again, outside the home, and this was specifically identified with men. So this is really exclusive to the middle class. Laboring class, so this idea of this, cult of domesticity that middle class women were sort of locked into, this was exclusive to the middle class. Laboring class women did not have the ability to stay home. Their working income was needed. And like I said a few minutes ago, the primary marker that separated the lower middle class from the laboring class was that the wife did not have to work. In the laboring class, women had to work. Their income was needed. They worked in the factories or maybe the fields. And life for the laboring class changed as well. So like I said, productive activity is no longer happening in the home for local markets. It's happening in factories and mills. And you can see an example here of like a mill floor, a factory floor in a textile mill in the early 19th century here down at the bottom. So this is really going to change things for laboring women also. It's going to make it more difficult in a lot of ways, because when economic activity was happening at home, women could participate in economic activity and care for children at the same time. Well, as increasingly economic activity happens outside of the house, they can't bring their children with them. They have to find relatives or others to care for their children as much as possible. And they had to leave them for, 8, 10, 12, 14, sometimes 16 hours a day while they worked in the factory floors. And then they would come home, and of course they would still be responsible for all of the other domestic tasks they weren't able to do while they were not at home. So in some ways, the roles for laboring women really, really doubled. Okay, so that's all we're going to talk about today, except for cities and labor organizations. So a little bit about with this increased migration or internal and external migration, with the growing size of industrial factories, we start to see increasing size in urban areas. So we see a big expansion of the slums as cities begin to grow really rapidly from this influx of migration. And in these areas, we see really poor sanitation, disease, higher crime rates. And these become characteristic of working or laboring class neighborhoods because cities really struggle to keep up with the growth in terms of services. We're also going to start to see with this transportation revolution we talked about in the last video, the creation of cities along transportation routes is going to occur, especially those moving into that Northwest territory that we've talked about, the Ohio River Valley, Buffalo, Cleveland, Detroit, Chicago, Cincinnati, St. Louis. All of these are going to be emerging cities in the early and middle 19th century. We're also going to see the establishment of organized labor. And listen, we're going to talk a lot more about organized labor in Unit 5 and 6, 6 especially, because it's going to become a lot more significant in the late 19th century, but we're starting to see emergence of it a little bit in the early 19th century antebellum period. So manufacturing made goods a lot cheaper and improved the standard of living for some, but farmers and artisans are going to really suffer from this. There's not as much call for for artisans anymore. Many of them are going to become dependent laborers in factories. And then there's a lot of common issues that emerge, like really low pay, especially in the early years of industrialization. Low pay, long hours, very unsafe conditions. So eventually we're going to start to see the formation of labor unions and local political parties that are intended to protect workers and worker interests. And this is going to be especially significant in the United States when, in the 19th century, as male suffrage does increase and all men, at least white men, have the ability to vote. So labor parties or parties claiming to represent the laboring class are going to become pretty significant. And again, we're going to talk a little bit more about this as we get into Units 5 and especially Unit 6. Okay, so that's it for Unit 4 video number 5. We'll see you next time when we get into Video 6.